The empire crumbled under the weight of sin. The twin sons of Helion and Arctos have long been the guiding lights of the Daykeeper Empire, their celestial dance a symbol of harmony and balance. But in the twilight of Emperor Solanar Helionheart's reign, a sinister plot unfolds, revealing the shadows that lurk beneath the Empire's radiant facade. As secrets are unveiled and ancient prophecies come to fruition, the once glorious Empire teeters on the brink of chaos, and the fate of Keremia itself hangs in the balance. Solanar's Last Walk by Nigel Watson. Under the baleful glow of twin suns, Solanar Helionheart, once sovereign of the resplendent Daykeeper Empire, now trudged the cobblestone path to his grim finale. The twin suns, Helion and Arctos, hung in the sky, casting an eerie light that danced between brilliance and shadow. This was Keremia, a world of perpetual duality, where light and darkness wove a complex tapestry of life and death. The towering bioluminescent ziggurats and solar cathedrals of Solus Magna, his capital, stood as silent sentinels, their sightless eyes casting judgment on the emperor shackled in ignominy. Each step he took was a torturous echo in his heart, resonating with the jeers and curses from the sea of onlookers that lined the streets. Solanar's once pristine golden bronze skin, a testament to his celestial lineage, was now a canvas of bruises and lacerations, stark evidence of his precipitous fall from grace. Shadows around him seemed to pulsate with malevolent intent, as if the very stones of the city whispered dark secrets, awaiting their inevitable resurgence. The air was thick with the stench of decay, a rotten, cloying odor that permeated the atmosphere, hinting at the deep corruption festering beneath the surface of the radiant empire. Above, Helion and Arctos cast a pallid light, their dance across the heavens more akin to a macabre waltz than the vibrant spectacle remembered in days of glory. Their light twisted into jagged shadows that flickered across the imperial plaza like haunting specters, mocking the emperor's dire procession. As he moved forward, a flicker of torchlight on a crumbling wall evoked the ghostly image of his last council with Archelus, the ancient mystic, and his once trusted advisor. In the dimly lit Grand Council chamber, the air thick with the smell of ancient tomes and arcane incense, Archelus had spoken with a voice heavy with foreboding. "This is no mere ritual formality, your radiance," he had intoned, his face a mask of grim solemnity illuminated by the eerie glow of emerald flames. Solanar had scoffed, his laugh echoing hollowly in the vast chamber. "Our empire's laws are unshakable. The council would not dare defy their emperor." "You underestimate the shadows that thrive in the light, my liege," Archelus had warned, his eyes piercing. "Rot spreads in the brightest halls when dark intentions fester in silence. But the laws are the very foundation of our empire," Solanar had insisted, his voice echoing in the chamber. "If I don't uphold them, who will?" "Even the purest light can be corrupted, Solanar," Archelus had replied softly, almost sadly. "Be wary of those who hide in the shadows." Solanar's footsteps faltered as he reached a particularly familiar stretch of the main road. It was here, many years ago, that he had made his triumphant entrance into the capital, his army at his back, the crowd roaring with adulation and throwing flowers in his path. Now those same people spat and hurled insults, their adoration turned to venom. His heart ached with the memory of their love, now lost forever. The day of his return to Solus Magna was etched into his mind with vivid clarity. It had been during the illumined spring, the season when both Helion and Arctos graced the skies in harmonious conjunction. The air was filled with the intoxicating scent of night-blooming radiantal blossoms, their petals unfurling under the influence of the twin suns' combined light. The streets were lined with citizens dressed in their finest garments, their faces alight with adulation and hope. Solanar had ridden at the head of his procession, mounted on a majestic Sunlancer stallion, its coat gleaming like molten gold in the radiant light. His armor, a masterpiece of scintillating metal and intricate engravings, reflected the celestial brilliance, making him appear almost godlike to the masses. At his side, Luminara's grief, its presence both a comfort and a constant reminder of his desperate act. The rhythmic clatter of hooves on cobblestone was accompanied by the resounding cheers of the crowd, their voices a thunderous symphony of praise. He had raised his hand in a jubilant salute, acknowledging the fervent devotion of his people. Flower petals rained down upon him, their vibrant colors swirling in the air like a cascade of blessings. Children ran alongside the procession, their eyes wide with wonder, while elders wept openly, overcome with emotion at the sight of their emperor. The capital itself had been transformed into a living tapestry of light and color, with streamers and garlands adorning every facade. Towering pyres of fragrant herbs and resins had been set ablaze, their smoke curling upwards in delicate tendrils, adding to the heady atmosphere of celebration. As he passed through the grand archway leading to the heart of the city, Solanar felt an overwhelming sense of pride and fulfillment. His vision of a unified empire, bound together by the radiant light of Helion and Arctos, had finally been realized. The citizens of Solus Magna looked up to him not just as their ruler, but as a beacon of hope and prosperity. The procession continued through the Avenue of Triumphs, where statues of past emperors stood in silent vigil. Each one had been meticulously crafted to capture the essence of the empire's greatest leaders, their stony visages gazing down with a mixture of reverence and solemnity. As Solanar rode past, he felt their eyes upon him, a tangible weight of expectation and legacy. Reaching the central plaza, he dismounted and ascended the steps of the solar cathedral, its spires reaching towards the heavens like outstretched hands. The structure was a marvel of engineering and artistry, its walls adorned with intricate mosaics depicting scenes from the Empire's storied history. Inside, the air was cool and hushed. The only sound was the soft rustle of fabric as the high priests and priestesses of the Luminescence Orthodoxy took their places. The grand event was the wedding that would unite the Daykeeper and Penumbrae realms, bringing an end to the long and bloody wars that had plagued their world. High Priestess Lyria, the sister of Arctos, a revered Daykeeper, had presided over the ceremony. She stood resplendent in robes of shimmering silk, her presence commanding reverence and respect. As Solanar and Celiara stood before the grand altar, Lyria anointed them with sacred oils, their scent a blend of rare spices and sacred herbs. The ceremony was a tapestry of light and shadow, representing the union of their two peoples. The High Priestess' voice rang out with a resonance that filled the cathedral and beyond. With this union, Lyria proclaimed, we forge a new path for our people. Under the guiding light of Helion and Arctos, and protected by the shadows of the darkest night, we shall prosper as one. As she spoke, the new banner of the unified empire was unfurled, a blazing sun flanked by twin stars and an encircling crescent, symbolizing the harmony and balance achieved through their union. The assembled crowd erupted into a chorus of jubilation, their voices echoing through the cathedral like a heavenly choir. The memory of that day was a bittersweet reminder of what he had once achieved and what he had ultimately lost. Now the same people who had celebrated his triumph looked upon him with disdain and contempt. Their cheers turned to jeers, their adulation to scorn. As Solanar walked through the jeering crowd, his gaze fell upon a weathered stone bench by the roadside. It was a simple thing, but it evoked memories of Irena and their humble beginnings. They had married young in their native village of Eldoria, far from the grandeur of Solus Magna. Irena's laughter and the scent of freshly baked bread seemed to drift from the past, pulling Solanar back to those simpler, happier days. In Eldoria, Solanar had been a charismatic and passionate young man. Irena, with her sun-streaked hair and infectious smile, had been his beloved from the moment they met. Both were warriors at heart, trained to defend their village from any threats. Their wedding was a modest affair, attended by friends and family who celebrated their union with heartfelt joy. The village had been their world, and in that small, close-knit community, they had thrived. Solanar's grandfather, Arcalus, was a powerful wizard who had taken the young Solanar under his wing. He taught Solanar the ways of combat and small, rudimentary magic, instilling in him the values of courage and justice. When the village fell under the oppressive rule of Count Arcanus, a tyrannical daykeeper who taxed the peasants heavily and ruled with an iron fist, Solanar, unable to bear the suffering of his people, rallied the villagers. His natural leadership and eloquence inspired a peasants' revolution. Irena stood by his side, her unwavering support giving him strength. Together, they led the rebellion. Arcalus, with his vast knowledge of magic, lent his powerful spells to their cause. The villagers, armed with simple tools and sheer determination, overthrew Count Arcanus in a bloody uprising. Solanar was nominated by the people as the new count, a position he accepted with humility and resolve. But the Daykeeper king, Thalor the Stern, who ruled a small and fractured realm, was not pleased with this turn of events. Determined to restore the count's family to power, King Thalor sent his army to crush the rebellion. Solanar, however, was not so easily defeated. With the aid of Archelaus's magic and the fierce loyalty of his people, he managed to repel the king's forces in a stunning victory. The final battle took place just outside of Solus Magna. Solanar, leading his ragtag army of peasants and magic wielders, faced the king's well-trained soldiers. Against all odds, Solanar's forces triumphed. He overthrew King Thalor and claimed the throne, becoming the ruler of the small Daykeeper realm. Irena, his queen, stood proudly beside him, their dreams of a better world seemingly within reach. With Irena as his queen and their 3 children playing in the gardens of their newfound palace, Solanar began his campaign to unify the Daykeeper realms. His conquests were swift and decisive, his leadership unyielding. Yet, amidst the victories and expansion, a shadow loomed over their happiness. Irena fell ill, her once vibrant spirit diminished by a mysterious sickness. The memory shifted to the harrowing night in the dimly lit chambers of the palace. Irena lay on her deathbed, her breathing shallow, her life force ebbing away. The room was filled with the somber glow of candles, their flames flickering like the fragile hold she had on life. Solanar knelt beside her, holding her frail hand, tears streaming down his face. "Archelaus, you must save her," Solanar had pleaded, his voice breaking with anguish. They stood in the darkened chambers of the mystic's sanctum, the air thick with the scent of burning incense and ancient tomes. Archelaus, his face etched with sorrow, had looked upon his grandson with a heavy heart. "My radiance, what you ask is forbidden," Archelaus had replied, his voice a whisper filled with dread. "The magic required to save her soul goes against the natural order. It would bind her spirit to an object, condemning her to an eternity of unrest." Solanar's eyes had burned with desperation. "I cannot lose her, Archelaus. She is my heart, my soul. There must be a way." After a moment of silence, Archelaus had nodded, his expression resigned. "Very well, but know this. Such an act will have consequences. The balance of life and death must not be disturbed lightly." Archelaus began the incantation, his voice a low, resonant chant that seemed to vibrate through the very fabric of reality. The air grew thick with an otherworldly presence, shadows deepening as if the room itself were being pulled into an abyss. With slow, deliberate movements, Archelaus produced a ceremonial blade, its surface inscribed with runes of power. He approached Irena, who lay unnaturally still, her eyes closed as if already accepting her fate. Solanar watched in horror as Archelaus made a large incision on her chest, the blade sliding through her skin as if it were butter. Yet, to his astonishment, there was no blood, no cry of pain. Irena remained serene, her face almost peaceful. "Stop this madness!" Solanar shouted, trying to rush forward, but he was held back by 2 towering golems, their stone grips unyielding. "Hold him!" Archelaus commanded the golems, his voice unwavering. "This must be done." As Solanar struggled, Archelaus slowly forced the ceremonial blade deeper into Irena's chest. The sword began to absorb her essence, her skin paling as the blade turned a deep scarlet. Runes along the sword's length illuminated, glowing with a strange, eldritch power. The air around them crackled with energy, and the room was filled with an eerie, pulsating light. Irena's body seemed to dissolve into the sword, her form melding with the metal until only the blade remained, now glowing with a crimson hue. The ritual's conclusion was marked by a final, resonant chant from Archelaus, sealing her spirit within the sword. Now, the cursed sword, named Luminara's Grief, hung at Solanar's side, a constant reminder of the price he had paid to keep a part of Irena with him. The sword's presence was a double-edged blade, offering solace and torment in equal measure. He could hear her voice, a faint whisper in his mind, and feel her spirit close, yet he knew she was trapped, unable to rest. "I would have given it all up for one more moment with you," he whispered to the ghost of his lost love, his voice lost in the cacophony of the crowd. The memory of Irena, intertwined with the dark ritual that saved her soul at such a high cost, haunted Solanar as he continued his march towards his final fate. The sight of Verulia, the 4th of his 7 children, but the eldest of Soliaras, lurking at the edge of the crowd with a cunning smile playing on his lips, plunged Solanar back into the night before his trial, a night fraught with tension and unspoken accusations. The memory shifted, dragging Solanar deeper into that fateful night. The night had been thick with an unnatural stillness, the kind that makes the skin crawl and the mind race with dark thoughts. Solanar and Solanar lay in their bedchamber, shrouded in shadows cast by the dim light of Arctos filtering through the heavy curtains. The room, usually a sanctuary, felt like a cold, foreboding crypt. He had tried to seek comfort in Solará's arms, but her touch had been cold, her embrace devoid of warmth. The bed they shared felt like a chasm, an abyss that swallowed all intimacy and left only an empty void. "Is there nothing left of us but this cold void?" Solanar had asked, his voice a low, desperate whisper as he reached out to her, the silk sheets chilling his feverish skin. Solanar turned away, her face obscured by the darkness. "Our marriage was always political, Solanar. You know I never loved you," she replied, her tone distant and hollow. "But I remained faithful to you and the Empire until now." Her words cut deeper than any blade. Solanar felt a pang of fear and confusion, unable to comprehend the full scope of her meaning. He tried to hold her to bridge the widening chasm between them, but she pulled away, her body rigid and unyielding. "You've changed, Solanar," he said, his voice trembling. "What happened to the woman who stood by my side, who honored our alliance with unwavering loyalty?" She turned to him then, her eyes cold and inscrutable. "That woman saw the light and the shadows. She learned that power and trust are but illusions, and that survival requires more than dreams. Do you not respect our vows?" he had asked, his voice barely more than a whisper. Solará's reply was chilling. "Respect is not the same as love, Solanar. Respect is earned, and it can be lost." Solanar recoiled, a cold dread settling in his stomach. He had seen a similar look in Verulia's eyes, the same calculating glint that now stared back at him from the crowd. The realization struck him with a nauseating force. Solará's betrayal had been meticulously planned, a web of deceit woven with her son's help. The memory shifted to the following day, the day of the trial. Solanar had walked into the tribunal with the confidence of a ruler who believed in the justice of his counsel. He wore his imperial regalia, the golden armor that once symbolized his unassailable authority. But the moment he stepped into the chamber, he felt an eerie chill, a premonition of the treachery to come. Solanar stood at the head of the council, her face a mask of serene detachment. Verulia sat beside her, his eyes gleaming with barely concealed triumph. The High Council, once a bastion of his support, now seemed a den of vipers, their gazes cold and unfeeling. The proceedings had been swift and brutal. Solará's voice rang out, cold and implacable, as she pronounced his crimes. For the unconscionable defilement of an innocent acolyte's sanctity through the blackest of necrosanct rites, this council hereby renders judgment upon Solanar Helionheart, betrayer of sacred legacies and oath-breaker before the luminous path. As Solanar struggled to comprehend the charges, the doors to the chamber opened and a young Penumbrae woman was led in. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with madness. She was the innocent who had been possessed by Irena's spirit, used as a vessel in another desperate act of forbidden love. The girl's voice trembled as she recounted her ordeal, her words spilling out in a torrent of confusion and terror. "I touched that sword in the Emperor's chamber. Then I felt her inside me, a ghost, a whisper, a scream. She took me, made me do things, terrible things. I couldn't stop it, couldn't fight it. I was there, but not there, watching, helpless. She used my body, made me speak, made me love him." Her eyes darted wildly around the chamber, her voice rising to a frantic pitch. I saw her memories, her pain, her love. I felt everything. The sword, it burns, it whispers. It's her, but not her, a monster, a demon in steel. Her testimony sent a murmur through the council, a mix of shock and righteous indignation. Solanar's heart sank as he realized the conspiracy against him. Solanar had been conspiring against him, using their bond as a cover for her machinations. And Verulia, their brilliant yet cunning son, had been her willing accomplice. This was the final piece, the damning evidence that Solanar and Verulia needed to ensure his downfall. Now, standing at the foot of the execution platform, stripped of his regal vestments and dignity, Solanar felt the weight of prophecy upon him. The crowd's roar was a deafening wave of rage and anticipation as he mounted the steps, his heart heavy but unbroken. As the guards forced Solanar to his knees, the executioner approached, lifting Luminara's grief, an unholy irony that twisted the knife of his impending doom. "I am sorry, my love, for you and our children." It was Irena's voice, resounding in Solanar's head. That would be the last time he received a telepathic message from his beloved, and tears streamed down his face. The blade, now deep crimson and alive with a malevolent power, was to be his executioner. Solanar recognized it instantly, the very sword into which his beloved wife's soul had been bound. The realization struck him with a mixture of horror and resignation, but still found the force for a sarcastic smile. With a cold, calculated efficiency, the executioner raised the sword. As soon as the blade was lifted, it began to emit a shrieking metallic sound that resonated like Irena's desperate cry. The same agonizing sound erupted from the throats of a dozen young women in the crowd, all of them possessed and used by Irena over the years. Their simultaneous screams created a harrowing chorus that echoed through the plaza, sending chills down the spines of all present. High above, Archelaus watched from the rooftop of a nearby house, his expression a mix of disgust and guilt. He understood the magnitude of the bond between Solanar and the sword, a bond forged in desperation and dark magic. The shrieks of the women, the sword's wailing, and the scene of impending death filled him with a profound sense of regret. He had been part of the ritual that had condemned Irena's spirit, and now he was witnessing the culmination of those unholy acts. As the executioner steadied himself to deliver the fatal blow, Solanar's eyes met those of one of the girls. In that moment, he realized the full extent of his actions, the desperation that had drained Irena's soul, the innocent women who had suffered possession, and the dark path that had led him to this final moment. It wasn't a conspiracy that had brought him here, but the consequences of his own hubris and the unholy deeds he had sanctioned. Solanar's voice rose above the cacophony, clear and unwavering. "My impure actions will bring chaos and darkness to our empire that will be shattered and consumed by wars and pestilence. I have failed you all, and for that I am truly sorry. But hear my final vow. I will return reincarnated in one of my heirs. I will make amends for my blasphemies and bring the light back to our world. The twin suns will shine brightly once more, and I will restore the peace and unity we have lost." The executioner, unfazed by the shrieking blade and the screams from the crowd, began his swing. The air was thick with tension, every eye fixed on the platform. Solanar closed his eyes, bracing for the end. As the blade descended, Irena's anguished cry grew to a deafening crescendo. Solanar felt a moment of piercing clarity, a final, devastating realization of his sins and the innocent lives tainted by his decisions. The sword's edge met his neck, and with a sickening finality, the execution was complete. The plaza fell into a stunned silence, the echoes of the screams lingering like a ghostly afterimage. Solanar's head rolled to the ground, eyes still open, staring unseeingly at the sky, a silent testament to the dark promise that his death had set into motion. High above, Archelaus turned away, his heart heavy with sorrow and shame. He had lost more than a pupil. He had lost his grandson to the very darkness he had sought to manipulate. The cries of the possessed women and the sight of Solanar's lifeless body would haunt him for the rest of his days. And so ended the reign of Solanar Helionheart, the Daykeeper Emperor that became Solanar the Wretched, a tragic figure that inspired songs and legends for the following centuries. His prophecy would haunt Keremia, a lingering shadow over the world, foretelling an age of turmoil and retribution yet to come. But in the promise of his return, there was also a glimmer of hope, a chance for redemption and the restoration of the light in the world of the two suns. In the end, Solanar's downfall was a tragic consequence of his own hubris and the lengths he was willing to go to defy the natural order. His desperate attempt to bind Irena's soul ultimately unleashed a chain of events that not only corrupted his empire, but also condemned innocent lives, leaving Keremia scarred by the shadows of his legacy. This is a sort of preface for a series of short stories in this world, so if you want more of this, make sure you show us your appreciation by smashing that like button. Oh, Solanar the Wretched! Click on the video on the left to watch Solanar the Wretched, the music video of the song inspired by this story.